Hello everybody, my name is Crystal Rodriguez, and for my site interview I had the pleasure of sitting down with Anais Biera Miracle. Mrs. Anais Biera Miracle is the Vice President of External Affairs for the Children's Shelter here in San Antonio. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights from our interview. I'll start off with some basic facts. So the Children's Shelter's mission statement is restoring innocence and strengthening families. It is a nationally accredited nonprofit organization. They have been around since 1901 here in San Antonio, and the agency sits on 10 acres. The Children's Shelter provides programs through 3 major categories, and each of these categories provides separate programs for different needs. So there's 3 categories, and each one of them has sub-programs for different needs. So there's the residential services, the family strengthening programs, and the mental health programs. So for the residential services, it provides the Children's Emergency Shelter, the residential treatment center, the foster care and adoption programs. And then for the family strengthening programs, there's the Nurse Family Partnership. They have Compadre y Compadre, and then they have the iParent SA. And then finally for the mental health services, they have the Harvey E. Najim Hope Center, which is better known as just the Hope Center. So Mrs. Biera Miracle, she went over in detail what each program provided. She explained everything to me, but I'm just going to go over the ones that stood out the most. So the emergency shelter, it houses 66 children at any given time. They provide round-the-clock trauma care for children's age birth to 16 years old. Children can stay as little as 72 hours, but no more than 90 days, and this is by law. The average stay at the shelter for a child here in San Antonio is 49 days. Mrs. Biera Miracle, she shared with me that 2 years ago the children's shelter became trauma-informed. And what trauma-informed means is that the shelter is able to provide appropriate mental care treatment for children that have been impacted by abuse, neglect, abandonment, and other traumatic events. The Harvey E. Najim Hope Center, better known as just the Hope Center, was built in October 2015 to provide trauma-informed treatments. Executive Chairman Harvey Najim donated $1 million towards this clinic. The model care, some of the mental treatments that therapists and counselors provide to children are the model of care, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and trust-based relational intervention. Again, so those are just some of the treatments that they provide. Moving on to funding. So according to Mrs. Biera Miracle, 60% of their funds come from the state. Other funding comes from United Way San Antonio, and the rest comes from private donations. Employees at the Children's Shelter. So there are currently 222 full-time employees. Positions range from administration to counselors and therapists. Employee hours range for each position. There can be anywhere from 8-hour shifts up to 16-hour shifts sometimes. She did give me an example. She compared some of the shifts at the emergency shelter to nurses at hospitals. So she told me that someone with an 8-hour shift could work up to 16 hours if somebody were to call in. So again, 8 hours and up. She also explained to me that program supervisors had to be available 24/7. So she told me because program supervisors work directly with CPS, they had to be available for emergency calls. And she also gave me an example for that. She told me that, say a CPS worker called one of the supervisors at the shelter at 1 o'clock in the morning, she said that they had to be available to pick up the phone and get the ball rolling. If a child needed emergency shelter, they had to get the ball rolling so that they could start the process to get this child to safety. So again, it ranges from 8 hours and up to 24 hours a day. Agency and human service worker challenges. So she mentioned that some of the challenges within the company and workers there was burnout, compensation, and high turnovers. She explained to me that traumatized children exhibit difficult behaviors which are sometimes challenging to deal with for caretakers. She Explained to me that some of these children that have been abused or neglected, sometimes when they're at the shelter, they lash out on some of the caretakers. They throw things, they exhibit, anger. And so sometimes this causes some of the workers to just quit because they can't take it. It's very challenging for them. So again, that's what causes some of these high turnovers. These children are not bad children. They've just been traumatized, and these behaviors are out of their control. This is what they've learned, and so these children just need patience. And so again, for some caretakers, it's just too challenging. So moving on to clientele demographics, which in this case is children. She explained to me that the socioeconomic status consists of the poverty and the working poor. So most of these children live in poverty. Hispanics make up the primary race that are assisted through the shelter programs. And she told me that gender fluctuates. So for some programs, the primary group is boys, and for other programs, it's girls. So again, it just fluctuates. Mrs. Biera Miracle also mentioned that there is a huge shortage for psychologists and psychiatrists across the U.S. and Texas. She explained that, this was especially true for working poor families and families with no insurance. This correlates with all the information that we've learned in class so far. So we know that, people living in poverty, they're unable to get the treatment that they so desperately need, professional treatment. So it's really unfortunate that a lot of these families, they don't get help. So some of these parents, they are drug dependent, and they can't get the help that they need because they just can't afford it. And so, in turn, that affects their children. Sometimes they put their children, in dangerous situations. And so these children end up in shelters. And again, it's just a really sad cycle. I'm going to go over some closing facts. So, last year, the Children's Shelter assisted between 4,000 and 5,000 families. The emergency shelter program housed 343 children in 2016, and 58% of these children were 4 years of age and younger. Also in 2016, 186 children were assisted through the therapeutic foster care programs. 96% of these children treated experienced improved cognitive developmental milestones, and 98% did not experience placement disruption. The Harvey E. Najim Hope Center assisted 248 children between the ages of 3 and 18. And finally, 110 additional families were treated through the trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy programs. These are some of the facts. Again, there's just so many programs, but those were some of the ones that stood out to me. The interview went really well. Mrs. Biera Miracle was very helpful. She was willing to give me as much information as I needed. So overall, the visit went really well, and I was really happy about that. And I think that's it. That's all I have. So thanks for watching.